We have got to stop the reactive nature, or at least reel it in a little bit. I understand there is outrage in the world. Of course there is. And we have the right to be outraged by murder. We have the right to be outraged by war. We have the right to be outraged by corruption. We have the right to be outraged when people treat each other poorly and harm other people, of course. But allowing that outrage to filter through, accepting the emotion as just outrage, and then taking a moment to think, well, what can I do about it? And what can I do about it beside reflecting back out to the world my outrage?
Revolution Radio proudly presents, live from the heart of the Blue Ridge, Roanoke, Virginia. It's the Just Bernard Show with host Bernard Alvarez. Join Bernard as he shares topics that reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience, including world liberty, the esoteric, suppressed technologies, spiritual ascension, and human consciousness. Humanity has awakened, and our time has come to realize our full potential. And now, live from the Star City, your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Let us see here. So, this one's very, I don't know how you want to call it, a different type of question. I believe that this might deal more with anthropological or sociological, but I will try to approach it more from a spiritual and energetic, because I do believe it is a controversial question, and there's going to be a lot of different answers to it, but I'll do my best to answer it. So someone wrote, during the present day, there is a controversial debate about aggression and violence across the world, and especially within the United States. I'm just wondering if there is a correlation between violent video games and the remarkable violence we're seeing in American society, mass shootings as an example. It's a very touchy subject, and I will do my best to handle it with eloquence and fairness and diplomacy. So, in that sense, let me just say that whether it is... I'm going to get the statistical stuff out of the way. So let's throw all that and get it out of the way, because for me this is not about statistics. This is about energy. So statistically, there are death metal bands and lots of violent video games all over Europe, and we're not seeing that stuff going on. So let's get that, that excuse out of the way that everybody tries to react and throw at the situation. Let's talk about it energetically. Energetically. Now let's be real here. Let's be grounded, and let's be mature spiritually about this. Energetically, when you are listening to, for instance, a waterfall, a stream of water running down a river, and you can just hear the water trickling, you get a certain, well, what do you feel? When you feel that, I don't want to influence you, but when you feel the water streaming, what do you feel? I know I feel a sense of calmness and a sense of peace. Now, when you hear, and don't get me wrong, I love Metallica, but let's say you hear an old Metallica song like Master of Puppets. When you hear Master of Puppets, da 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 da, what do you feel? What does it evoke within you? Is it what the stream evokes? Or is it more your central nervous system begins to cringe a little bit and whatnot? And again, I love Metallica. I'm not bashing them. I'm just talking about energetics. Energetically, I know I get a little, my muscles begin to cringe or whatnot. So we're talking about sound, audio. What about visual? What about visual? When you see a video of, let's say, you're watching the aspect of a drone flying over a canyon, and you're seeing nature and water and lakes and mountains and greenery. When you see that, energetically, what does it stimulate within you? Does it stimulate happiness, peace? You know, well, not for me, it stimulates peacefulness. So now, let us say you're watching a video of, or a video game. Let's get right to the point, of video game of you're a soldier in Afghanistan, and you're in a tank or a Humvee or whatever, and you're blowing up people and shooting people and cutting off slicing their necks, etc., etc., seeing warlike simulation. How does it make you feel? Versus seeing the images of the mountains and whatnot. I know, for me, again, there is a reaction in the central nervous system. The physical body reacts to the emotional stimulus, or the visual stimulus, which creates an emotion that makes the body react. There's some deep metaphysics, if that's what you want to call it, but follow along. So if we are going back to the question, is there a correlation between violent video games and violence in society? Energetically speaking, I'll say yes. Energetically speaking. I'm not speaking statistics. But the point of this, and the point of my answer, is that in today's world, we have lost responsibility for that which we expose our senses to. And I'm going to go into that actually after the break, when I'm going to go into social programming and brainwashing, which is going on rampantly today. But we have lost responsibility. We're no longer taking responsibility for that which we expose our senses to. If we were to take responsibility for that which we expose our senses to, we would probably choose something either funny or beautiful, something that makes us feel good. In today's world, we have people that, for example, you go into a dentist's office or something, and what's playing? It's usually like Fox News or something, just 24/7, 24/7. And whether you're watching it or not, and I talk about this all the time, if you have a TV going on in the background, you're being irresponsible with your senses. There's information going into your brain, whether you like it or not. That information is going into your subconscious mind, and it is programming you in one sense. And I don't want to lean into the programming yet. I want to stay on topic here with the violent video games and violent society. If we were to pay attention, and be conscious and be mindful of what we are exposing our senses to, whether it be the news, whether it be movies, even, and don't get me wrong, I love superhero movies, but there's a lot of heads being ripped off. And I just watched Deadpool the other day, and it was like, there was just like bodies being ripped apart. Don't get me wrong, I love the movie. It was a great movie. But it's violent. There's a lot of violence. And, you know, I know our mind wants to tell us that it's make-believe, but it goes into our subconscious mind. Yeah, of course it's entertaining. We kind of know it's make-believe, but our brain can't tell the difference. Your subconscious mind does not know the difference of whether it's make-believe or not. Your subconscious mind sees it as optical stimulus as well as auditory stimulus, depending on, you know, what you're hearing and what you're seeing. So why do we have such a violent society? Because we are being saturated with violence. We are saturated with violence in movies, in television, in music, in video games. And the number one perpetuator of this is probably the news itself, because all it is, for me, which is why I don't watch I don't watch news media at all. I will search and seek a topic that comes to mind and research it myself. But the news loves to celebrate violence, and I don't want to say celebrate it, but it keeps going on and on about a violent act, 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 war, 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 murder, 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 mass shooting, mass shooting, mass shooting. And how is this healthy? Seriously, how is this healthy for a society? So back to the question, is there a correlation between violent video games and the violence we see in society? It is one correlation. One correlation. There's many aspects to this unfortunate mess that we see ourselves in. But I will say it starts with taking responsibility for your senses, taking responsibility of what you're looking at. What are you listening to? Are you playing the radio on in the background and not paying attention? All that stuff is going into your brain. You ever catch yourself singing commercial jingles? It's like, where did I get that? Because I was listening to the radio all day, not paying attention. The next thing you know, I'm singing a commercial jingle. The same thing goes with television. The same thing goes with video games. All day long, our body is being stimulated in one way or another. Our eyes are being stimulated. Our ears are being stimulated. Our nose is being stimulated. What are we smelling? You know, all of our senses. And if we are evolved enough to understand, not only are we dealing with the five senses, we're dealing with sixth sense of whether you want to call it psychic, intuitive, and or energetic. We are being bombarded energetically and psychically all the time. We are being stimulated energetically all the time. When you walk into a room and everybody's looking at you weird, or you can tell there's something wrong, you can sense that. That's energetic. That's psychic. We all have it, and we're going to get into that, maybe not today, but by all means, there is, if you head over to my patreon.com/Bernard Alvarez, I do have a 2-hour course on how to connect with your higher self and become more aware of all these things that we're talking about. Anyway, we're coming up on a break, and we'll be back right after this break. We're going to talk about the brainwashing of society. I said earlier before the break, and actually we've been talking about being conscious, being mindful of what we allow into our consciousness and what we allow into our senses, and how easily we can become influenced if we're not mindful of what we are giving our attention to. About 2 or 3 days ago, I guess for lack of a better term, I had an epiphany moment. And, you know, I do a lot, like I said, I do a lot of work with a lot of other nonprofits as well. I work with media companies, and I see a lot of what the global discussion is, especially on social media and whatnot. And I posted this status update. So I'm going to read it to you, and you're going to understand where I'm coming from with this. I wrote that I personally take no issue with Trump followers, Clinton followers, Pope, Prince, religious followers. My concern is for any type of blind faith. The groupthink mentality, a lack of consciousness and discernment. Celebrating the idea of a person or a God is much different than supporting good deeds and actions. When a person can do no wrong in someone's eyes and not be held accountable for the actions that maim, harm, destroy other people's, our planet, our health, our freedom, and they're not being held accountable or held responsible, we are no better than those who perpetuate the very atrocities themselves. Cognitive dissonance thrives when we are not responsible for our thoughts and beliefs, and we become mere pawns in a cosmic nightmare of manipulation and oppression. You are God, goddess. Never forget the power you wield in creating a better world. So with that said, it got me thinking. You know, there is a certain, how shall I say, a certain social programming that comes into play depending on the culture we live in, depending on the society we live in, depending on our family, our education, and whatnot. And it got me to thinking, you know, who am I loyal to? And is loyalty another form of blind faith, or an act? Well, there's two sides to loyalty. Let me be very clear. There are two sides to loyalty. Loyalty can be expressed as unconditional love, let's say for a family member or a partner, a husband, a wife, or it can be just blind faith and just hero worship. It is the latter that I'm speaking of here. My concern is hero worship, that we don't hold our heroes, our leaders, our gods, our popes, our princes, our kings, our queens, for lack of a better term, our media personalities. We don't hold them responsible when they do something wrong. We're like, oh, but it's Trump. Oh, but it's Hillary. Oh, but it's the Baptist Church. They can do no wrong, whatever it might be. So who are we loyal to? We can be loyal to a partner. We can be loyal to our family. We can be loyal to our employer, for example. When I was working for the Paul Mitchell Corporation about 10 years ago, and I happened to have a high regard for that company. It's very philanthropic. It's very earth-based, all about natural and organic, and saving the oceans. As a matter of fact, they support Paul Watson and the whole thing about saving the whales and whatnot. I was very loyal to them. So we can be loyal to an employer. We can be loyal, as Treva was saying earlier, to a sports team, and that becomes a part of our personality. How that sports team does in the finals, who's against them, people that might be on the opposite team are our enemy, and we treat them as such. And this becomes a reality for us. At the same time, we can have those sports heroes rape, sell drugs, or whatnot, beat women, and they're not held accountable. Then, of course, we have political parties. That loyalty, that is the ultimate divisive nature of society. The loyalty toward a political party, that the political party, no matter what the issue is, because you align yourself with a particular political party, that they can do no wrong. That there seems to be, again, a cognitive dissonance. We know that war is wrong. We know that murder is wrong. We know that stealing from poor people is wrong, and yet we still support the parties, and we still support the candidates and the politicians. And it doesn't matter whether it's Democrat, Republican, Labor Party, Green Party, Libertarian Party, whatever it is. There's a blind loyalty there. Same thing with religion. And, well, that could be a whole 2-hour show. I'm not going to go into much detail, but it's the same thing as a political party. I'm a Christian, you're a Catholic. Look at what's been going on in Ireland. Look at what's been going on in Palestine and Israel over religion. And yet there's still blind loyalty toward the Palestinians, and there's still blind loyalty toward Israel. We can have loyalty toward our city, toward our town. We can have loyalty to our state, our country, which becomes nationalism. And one day, hopefully one day, we will have loyalty to our planet, because we will start interacting with other planets. I think of Star Trek and the Federation of Planets and whatnot. But where is the loyalty to ourselves? Is it selfish to be loyal to your own beliefs? And when I say your own beliefs, I mean the beliefs that come from within, not the beliefs that ESPN is telling you, not the beliefs that Hillary Clinton is telling you, not the beliefs that Jerry Falwell is telling you, the beliefs that you feel within your heart. Your authentic self is the only voice you should be paying attention to. Your authentic self, gathering information, let's say from our higher self that I speak of quite often, is the only loyalty that we should have. And actually, I'm not even going to use the word should. I hate that word. It would be best if we chose, I have a little hair here driving me crazy. It would be best if we chose loyalty and we acted in honor and in reverence and in integrity to that which our heart tells us, not our programmed subconscious mind, which has been bombarded with media 24 hours a day, not our idea of what is right and wrong through someone else's concept, When we begin to see the world as black and white, and those constructs come from another person, talk about living in the matrix. Talk about living in an illusion. That is why it is so imperative that we have loyalty to our authentic self, and we learn to be mindful. We learn to connect with our higher wisdom, our higher self, our source consciousness, and to only be loyal to that. The reality is we are constantly, and especially in today's world, especially in the way that our society has been constructed this last year or two since, and I will say since the election, the national election in the United States, our world has been one of reaction. Everyone is reacting to he said, she said, he did, she did. And when we are in a reactive state of mind, picture a pinball machine just being bounced around. Do you want to be the ball? Do you just want to be bouncing around from reaction to reaction to reaction to reaction? Or do you want to be the guy who pulls the plunger and shoots the ball off and sends that energetic construct, that energetic consciousness in a particular direction? You have the power to do that. You have the power to be God, Goddess within your life. But the only way that we will accomplish this is by disconnecting our psychic, energetic, mental, and emotional loyalties to that which are not from our true higher self. Now, there is responsibility. I understand that. Of course, I would be loyal to my partner. If they're not harming me or they're not harming somebody else, I'm going to be loyal to my partner, my husband, my wife, my children, my family. I'm going to be loyal to the organizations I work with, of course. But is it out of reaction, or is it being proactive? Are you doing it to be proactive, to bring better alignment within your spiritual nature, your energetic body? Or are you doing it to fit in, and are you just reflecting out back to the world what Fox News is telling you, or CNN, or MSNBC, or Trump, or Hillary, or for that matter, a religious leader? Is it something you feel, or is it something you heard? Think about that. We have got to stop the reactive nature, or at least reel it in a little bit. I understand there is outrage in the world. Of course there is. And we have the right to be outraged by murder. We have the right to be outraged by war. We have the right to be outraged by corruption. We have the right to be outraged when people treat each other poorly and harm other people, of course. But allowing that outrage to filter through, accepting the emotion as just outrage, and then taking a moment to think, well, what can I do about it? And what can I do about it beside reflecting back out to the world my outrage? Of course I'm outraged. Of course I'm disgusted sometimes by the things that I see and I hear. But what's the best way to go about it? Is it to go on Facebook and start calling people names? Is it to, start an organization of like-minded people who are as outraged as I am and angry as I am? Do we really want to create groups and cliques of just angry people? What will that solve? And when you think about it, do you really want to be angry all the time? Do you really want to be around people that are angry all the time? Those of you who have been following me for a few years now, and I've been doing this a very long time, I've been through my angry, outrage self. I've been an activist for quite a while, and quite honestly, I have left many activist organizations because they dropped to that low vibration, angry organization. Just a bunch of people sitting around being cranky and bitching and moaning and making fun of the president, or making fun of some religious leader or some political leader. What kind of life is that? Is that the kind of life you want to live? Is that the kind of world you want to live in? So again, bringing it back to the beginning of what I'm talking about here, we must be aware that we are responsible for our thoughts and our beliefs, and we have to be honest with ourselves. Where are they coming from? am I believing this just because my father told me this? Am I believing this just because, I don't know, Rush Limbaugh told me this, or MSNBC told me this? Is that why I believe it? And I'm taking this as a reality, as a belief that I'm going to integrate into my body, into my energetic body, and into my life? So let's think about that. Let's think about, where are our beliefs coming from? Think about where our loyalties lie. Are they out there, or are they in here? Become more loyal with your authentic self. I'm going to move on to the next question now. I just want to take a look and see who's online. Say hello. Well, hello, Molly. Thank you for watching. Hello, Stephen. Great to have you. Thanks for watching. All right, so I'm going to move on to another question that one of you all sent. Actually, this is a good one. This is more of a utility question, so I'm happy to answer it. A gentleman wrote, I've been practicing for a few years, and mostly I meditate. I've never had a book of shadows or anything like that, even though I probably should have, LOL, but I do really want to learn more about my native Cherokee Blackfoot lineage, really learning how to connect with that side of my bloodline spiritually. I don't know. Do I need to somehow find a shaman? Okay. I think many of us can relate to this question in one form or another, whether it's reconnecting with your Native American, Indigenous, Celtic, whatever it might be, that you want to reconnect with that spiritual side of your family or of your path. I kind of look at this like, it sounds to me like they want to connect with a teacher, but they especially want to connect with a teacher that is of their lineage. I find the best way to do something like that is to start going, and not just on Facebook. I understand Facebook groups are great, and yes, actually, let's start off with that. Facebook groups are great. They are. You can find teachers. You can make connections with people. But I do feel it's important to start going to actual events and meeting people. If you're interested in Cherokee Blackfoot, go to a Cherokee Blackfoot powwow or a gathering of the nations. When it comes to finding a shaman, be very weary. The shaman will usually find you. If they're online and you have to buy them, don't get me wrong, shamans do deserve to be compensated. As a teacher, I do ask for compensation, but be wary of, I mean, one-on-one compensation. Be wary of those who are going to charge you $400 for, you know, a one-day seminar or something like that, and it's open to everybody. A shaman, literally, for me, a shaman is about healing. And going to a shaman for a treatment is probably very helpful. That might be able to open you up to allow energies and allow a little bit of focus and discernment in to find a teacher. But I don't know that a shaman would really be a teacher unless he would take you in as an apprentice. I know there are shamans out there that do take on apprentices. My dear friend Ashley Windwalker will take on an apprentice. I will take on an apprentice. But it's far and few in between, and it's not as easy as perhaps meeting up with those of like mind. And through that, you'll find other people. And I guess that's really the best I can say. I mean, for me, it's just about meeting people, getting to know them, especially when it comes to finding a spiritual teacher. And I think that's the point I'm trying to make here, is a lot of times we get very excited about learning a new path, a new tradition, whether it be Wicca, whether it be paganism, whether it be Cherokee Blackfoot spirituality, whether it be Starseed Lightworker, whatever it is, and we get very excited. And again, we don't use discernment, and we become loyal to a teacher that may not be the right teacher for us. Use discernment. Use discernment, and if anything, the best way to ask for a teacher is to ask the universe to bring you a teacher. And again, I feel that's what the question is. How do I find a teacher? And I hope that that answers it. But yeah, utilize Facebook, utilize meetups. Meetups are a great way to find groups with the same interests, and within that, perhaps you can find a traditional teacher, depending on what you're looking for. Anyway, I hope that helps. We're running out of time, and I do have one question here that I promised a friend who wrote, Jesus, about a month ago. This was written from a friend who happens to be a fan of my work and of Stephen Mailer. Now, it's a question that might be academic, and for those of you that don't know, Stephen Mailer has been on the show quite a bit in the past, and I'm hoping to have him on soon again. They just got back from a tour of Egypt. And anyway, the question is, what are the similarities between Hathor and Aset? And for those of you that don't know, Aset is a Kemetic term for Isis. Plus, there is interpretation Stephen Mailer utilizes referring to them as divine aspects. I'm curious what your thoughts are, particularly on the goddess aspect, Isis, Aset. Thanks again. So there's multiple questions there, and I'm not going to answer them from an academic standpoint. I'm not an academic. You probably best to go to Stephen Mailer on something about the academia, or even Patricia Ayan, who's been on the show as well. But for me, from what I notice, and through my initiation teachings, I went through the Temple of Egyptian Magic initiation like 25 years ago. So what I remember, Hathor and Aset, or Isis, are very similar because I think people get them confused because they both usually have the sun disk on top of their head. As well, Hathor is considered the mother of all gods. As a matter of fact, Hathor gave birth to Ra. So for me, I see Hathor as a quote-unquote source goddess, and I believe the term is primeval or something to that effect, academically speaking. For me, she is like the source of the gods and goddesses. People get mixed up with them, again, because of the sun disk, and because since Hathor gave birth to the gods, or to Ra, and Ra is the head god, depending on what dynasty you're looking at. Maybe I am getting academic. Apologies. I don't mean to be. There is a little bit of confusion because Isis is also considered the great mother of the universe and the great mother goddess, Aset. The way that you can tell the difference, and for me, a lot of people get confused because of the sun disk, and a lot of people get confused because of the wings. A lot of them have the wings, but Isis is not the only one that has the wings. Several Egyptian netters, goddesses, have the wings. Isis usually has a throne. So you always look for a symbol of a throne near or around her head. And Hathor usually has cow horns. She's the cow-headed goddess in many interpretations. So yeah, there's a little confusion. Both are mother goddesses. Both give birth to the gods. And, Isis gave birth to Horus, etc., etc. So with that being said, the next part of the question is, Mailer utilizes them as divine aspects. And I have spoken on this before, and I'm more than happy to talk about it again in the 3 minutes that I have left. The idea of gods and goddesses, especially within the Kemetic magical paradigm, and actually within mine and the way that I see gods and goddesses, is not necessarily like individual beings floating around and causing thunder and whatnot. There's no gray-haired guy in the sky shooting down lightning bolts. The netters, as they are called, the netters, the gods and goddesses, are aspects of natural energies and functions of the universe. For example, growth, the grass, the energy that grows the grass. You could probably compare that to Isis. Fire, water, anger, passion. As again, Isis. Another correlation between Isis and Hathor is the sign of Virgo, which again is love, goddess of love and whatnot. But the energy consciousness of love, the energy consciousness of war, of justice. One of my favorite gods and goddesses of universal balance and justice is the Neter Ma'at, and Ma'at keeps everything in balance. You know, the energy of the universe. You know, good and bad, polarity, whatnot. So the Neters are seen as energetic functions. They're not seen. They're not seen as these beings floating around looking down at us and whatnot. And if I'm not mistaken, and forgive me, I believe Hakim said there's 365 or something like that. You have to go back and go into my archives with Patricia and Stephen. They do cover this. But there are that many aspects of energy in the universe. So when we are kind of like, and I'm sorry if I'm babbling here, but it kind of reminds me of like the saints in Catholicism. You pray to a saint for this, you pray to a saint for that. The gods and the goddesses represent the very same thing. Different aspects of nature. They're not necessarily beings floating around. I'm curious, what are your thoughts, particularly on the goddess aspect of Isis? Well, again, Isis is seen as the great mother. She is the great mother of life. She is the nurturer. She is the earth. She gives birth to all things, again, leading into that confusion with Hathor. She's a goddess of love, of sexuality, of all divine feminine aspects. And for me, I will say that all the other Neters kind of stream out of that, you know, depending on what energy frequency we're talking about. And I think that's the term I should be using, is energy frequency. But I hope that was a little bit babbly, but I hope that answers the question. I for one, I am very, very connected to Aset. She is my patron goddess. She was, well, that's the magical path I was initiated into. So she still means a lot to me. I don't really consider myself having a patron god anymore, but if I do pray, and I do pray, I do pray to Aset, to Isis. When I need someone to listen, it's usually the mother Isis that I speak to. Anyway, we are out of time. That went by very quickly. I want to thank you all very much. I see we did have some good conversation, and as usual, it was great connecting with all of you, and we'll be back next week. Have a great week, everyone. I love you. Bye-bye.